Hello, and welcome to the 7th session of our Tapestry Teachers Training Series entitled Holding Socratic Discussions. I'm MARCIA Somerville, and together with some of the moms from my local co-op, I'd like to teach and demonstrate for you one of the central educational approaches that's woven into Tapestry of Grace, holding Socratic discussions with your dialectic and rhetoric students. In this session, I'm going to first define the term Socratic discussions for you. I'll try to explain both what it is and what it's not so you can more clearly understand. Next, I'm going to explain why we have Socratic discussion outlines in Tapestry of Grace. I'll tell you what their goals and purposes within the overall scope of teaching the humanities to Christian students. And then, we have a treat for you. I called upon 4 moms who teach with me in my local co-op to do some demonstration sessions with the students here in Maryland. We had fun setting up mock scenes where you can see various applications of Socratic discussion. At the end of this session, my hope and prayer is that you'll say, "Oh, is that all you mean by Socratic discussion? I can do that." I think you'll see that many of you moms use Socratic questioning naturally all the time. You just never knew to attach the label Socratic to it. So with that introduction in mind, let's get started. What is Socratic discussion? Most simply put, Socratic discussion is teaching others by asking leading questions that are asked not only to draw out individual answers, but also to encourage fundamental insights into the issue at hand. This form of discussion is named for the Greek philosopher Socrates. Socrates lived and taught in Athens, Greece during the golden classical age in the late 5th century before Christ. He was actually one of the founders of Western philosophy, which focuses on an examination of matters such as existence, how we know things, human values, reasoning in the mind, and language. Socrates went around Athens during his life and asked questions of others. When they answered, he'd follow up with another question. When they answered that, he followed up with yet another question. In each interchange, the one being questioned had to reconsider his last point in light of new insights that the next question gave him. As we said in our definition, the purpose of Socrates' questions was not only to draw out individual answers, but to encourage fundamental insights into issues under discussion. This is the essence of Socratic discussions when properly done. Let's talk about what Socratic discussion is not. I'm going to further define Socratic discussion by contrasting it with other forms of discussion for you. Socratic discussion is not lecturing. In a lecture, such as this presentation, the expert speaks for long periods of time and the student listens. The lecturer may use slides, a whiteboard, or other visual aids, such as video, but his basic mode is to teach by means of presenting, and there's typically no interactive part for the student to play. Socratic discussion is also not a conversation among peers. It's not a wandering talk with no predetermined sense of direction. It's not an open forum where equals all throw into the ring whatever they think on an issue. Socratic discussion is not a panel discussion where 3 to 5 experts give their opinion on an issue and the students merely watch. It's also not a debate where 2 teams or individuals argue a series of points and a judge, as well as the audience, decides the outcome of the encounter. And finally, it's not what I call educational ping pong. And by this I mean the kind of discussion, although it's hardly worthy of the name for what I'm describing, where the teacher has an answer book and the student has answered a series of questions at the end of a textbook, and now the teacher and the student sit down to have a session wherein they go over this material. So, for instance, if it's a science textbook and the student's been learning about insects and the mother's teacher's manual says, "So, how many parts are there on an insect's body?" 3. Good. And what is the first part called? The head. Good. And how many legs does an insect have? 6. Good. That's what I call educational ping pong, and Socratic discussion is definitely not that. In fact, Socratic discussion is none of these teaching formats. Rather, it's the intentional questioning by a teacher, you, that leads the student through an ordered series of thoughts and ideas. The point of the exercise is to cause him to think about his opinions and ideas more deeply and to make him give reasons for them. By adopting the Socratic approach, we teaching moms arm ourselves with a powerful tool for equipping our students to eventually give non-Christians a reason for the biblical hope to which they've been called, which is our reason for teaching the classics to our children. Now let's turn to Socratic discussions within Tapestry. Socratic discussions form the centerpiece of our read, think, write approach when teaching older students with Tapestry of Grace. What we encourage is that your dialectic and rhetoric students read independently for information first. Then, after answering a series of prep questions, they think about what they've read by having you lead them through a Socratic discussion. For dialectics, your goal is to help them see and form new connections between facts that they may be familiar with from their grammar years or new facts that they may have just learned in their reading. For rhetorics, your goal is to help them analyze the issues at hand and then synthesize their own views on the issues, and ultimately to create for themselves biblically informed opinions and worldviews from these discussions. Now, why do we make such a point of equipping you to be a Socratic discussion leader? Well, first, it's just straight up good teaching. It's effective because questioning retains the focus of the student. Unlike such methods as lecturing or panel debates, there's no zoning out while the teacher or the panelist drones on and on. Think of yourself during Sunday sermons. Unless a preacher's subject or delivery are of immense interest to you, chances are that during his 45-minute presentation, your mind will wander at some point. And even if it doesn't, how much did you retain from the sermon that you heard 2 weeks ago? Can you even recall the subject of the sermon? I know it's challenging for me. Lecturing is simply not a highly effective method for teaching content that you wish your students to retain. Socratic discussion, by contrast, engages the student constantly. Think of a lengthy conversation that you may have had 2 weeks ago. I'd predict that you remained far more engaged in it, unless you were maybe multitasking, than you did in the sermon 2 weeks ago, and I'll take a further guess that you retained more of the content as well. Now, beyond simply paying attention, people remember conclusions that they draw for themselves. For this, I'll offer the analogy of 4 women going together to a location that's new to them all, a bridal shower. Let us say that the subsequent rehearsal dinner, a month later, is in the same location. The woman who drove the other 3 ladies to the shower will remember how to get there far more readily than the other 3 who were merrily chatting as the journey progressed. Why? Well, the driver was engaged with the road. She was paying attention and looking for the turns and landmarks while the other 3 were enjoying uninterrupted conversation. The driver simply learned more about the route than her 3 companions. Similarly, the student who is skillfully led through a series of questions that cause him to think about the issue at hand and about his opinions of that issue and to respond will remember the insights and conclusions that he draws far more readily than the student who has sat in a lecture and heard the professor's brilliant personal insights and conclusions. It's just how we work. We remember how we got there if we participate actively in finding the way. Finally, and especially with youths, the reason Socratic discussion is effective is that the Bible tells us that fools delight in airing their own opinions. Now, I'm not calling your student a fool, but young people who are, by definition, more foolish than adults often seem to delight more in airing their own opinions than in getting wisdom from their elders. This being true, Socratic discussion is tailor-made to harness this tendency. Socratic questioning encourages your youth to express his opinions, and then questions those opinions so that he can examine and modify them to more biblical ones, and then remember and own them once the process is done. So for all these reasons, Socratic questioning really is the centerpiece of the read, think, write approach, and indeed of all of our teaching with Tapestry of Grace to older students. Now, in Tapestry, we use Socratic questioning in different ways depending on the learning level and the maturity of the student. As I alluded to earlier, most moms use Socratic questioning every day without knowing that this is what they're doing. Watch this clip of Sherry and her son Shane on a typical Wednesday morning and see if you can see yourself in it.
Hey Mom, can I go to Caleb's?
Did you get all your school done?
Yeah, I did my history and literature, but I'm going to wait for math to do with Dad tonight.
Okay. How about, what is your responsibilities with the dogs?
I fed them and I took them out twice already.
Okay. What's today?
Wednesday.
What, do you have chores? What chores do you have on Wednesday?
Recycling, garbage, and cleaning my room.
Are all three of those done?
I did the recycling and garbage, but I did not clean my room.
So what do you think the answer might be for going to Caleb's?
Most likely not.
That would be the answer. Yep. All right.
Can you see how Sherry was leading Shane to come to his own conclusions? She wants Shane to be able to process such requests for himself so that he can manage his own time well when he's full grown. Note that her questions are purposeful. She already knows the answers to the questions she's asking. She's asking so that Shane will both understand and own the answer that they arrive at together. Now here's an example of a mom in the same situation who doesn't use the Socratic method. Sherry and Shane are replaying the same scene, but without the helpful questioning.
Mom, can I go to Caleb's?
No, I don't think so.
Why?
Well, I know you already did your school, but it's Wednesday and you didn't do the garbage and the recycling, and you didn't feed the dogs. You did do your bedrooms, but you didn't finish everything, so you can't go.
Fine.
Can you see that in this instance, Shane didn't learn to process his request at all? He was flatly told no, and then had to ask for an explanation. Sherry went on to answer his question and then to give him the reasons why she had reached her own conclusion. As our youths grow older, the Socratic approach may constitute not only better teaching, but better, or at least kinder, parenting. In the first scenario, Shane is both submitted to his mom and coming to his own conclusion. There is agreement and unity between them. In the second one, Shane seems almost slapped down by a harsh word. Sherry doesn't mean to be harsh, but the delivery makes it seem that way. The value of Socratic questioning to us parents is that we can teach our youths to process a variety of requests or suitable actions to situations and arrive at right conclusions for themselves. Now, let's look at the grammar years for a second. Young students in the grammar years can engage in these kinds of life skill question and answer sessions, such as the one we just showed you with Sherry and Shane. But academically, they aren't ready for either connections or analysis. You don't really serve them by trying to get them to do these kinds of things, but you can use questions to encourage them to narrate as a form of engaged verbal processing. Let's say that your fifth grader has just finished reading a literature assignment. You can ask these kinds of narration questions over and over for each and every book, and it will help your student to discuss his readings. Such narration questions are like these. How did you like the book? That's an opinion question. What was the basic plot? This one can get a little long with kids who love to tell you all the details, but be patient. At least they're talking to you. Who was your favorite character and why? What did the villain of the book do and why? Was the hero someone who would have pleased God? Why or why not? Who was your favorite minor character and why? What was the most exciting or sad or happy or scary part of the book? Now, if your student is in the middle of the book, you can also ask, how do you think the story will end? And why do you think that? See, questions like this help to cement the reading in your student's mind as he speaks his thoughts, and they also help you to know how thoroughly he's done his reading. You don't have to have read the book at all in order to ask such narration questions. The more vague and general his responses are, the more you know that he didn't really take in the details of his reading. The more he gives crisp, rapid, or animated answers, the more he's engaged with the material. The same is true for history and other disciplines. Narration is a powerful tool in your teaching toolbox for the grammar years. Now let's move on to the dialectic stage. With these students, your tapestry discussion outlines focus you on helping your students make connections. Some of this involves going over the main ideas or subject content. In our next video segment, we're going to listen to Polly and her son Daniel go over the factual content about Ronald Reagan as part of their history discussion in Year 4, Unit 4. Daniel is right on the cusp between dialectic and rhetoric stages at this time, but age-wise he's only a rising 8th grader. Pay close attention to the kinds of questions Polly is asking, as you also enjoy Daniel's somewhat precocious answers.
All right, Dan, today we're going to talk about Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
And I want to know, what was some of his experience before he became president?
Well, before he became president, he was born into kind of a poor family. His father was a shoemaker, and he he went to school, and he was very into acting. He went on the school drama team. He was pretty popular, and then later in life he got a contract with Warner Brothers Studios to become an actor.
What was his first political experience?
His first political experience was he was the governor of California, and as governor, he cut taxes. He was very much against anti-war, anti-Vietnam War protesters and demonstrators, and.
Okay. Well, when he became after governor of California, then what happened?
Well, let me think.
What was the next office he held?
The next office he held was, I think it was the president.
It was the president. That's right. And who had been president right before him?
It was James Carter.
Jimmy Carter, right? Okay. So when he got into office, Americans were really kind of excited by him. It was a landslide, right? He won by a lot. Why? Why were Americans so kind of pumped by him?
Well, he was after the Carter years and the Ford years. That was a very, very kind of, it was called a malaise almost. It was just kind of not really dull, but it just felt like America wasn't really what it should be. It was just lots of bad things.
What had happened kind of that caused that?
Well, the Iranian hostage crisis had occurred. There was the whole energy crisis with the what's it called? OPEC.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was.
What had happened that made America mistrust government?
Before that, during Nixon's presidency, was Watergate, where he tried to break into the Democrats' offices, and he lied about it.
So all this is leading up to Reagan. So what was different about Reagan? Why did people feel so excited about him?
Well, he was just so enthusiastic about America. He was, after all that, it felt like he was a lightning bolt of just energy and just excited. He was excited about being an American. It was.
What did he think of America? What did he communicate about America?
That America was the best nation ever, and that it still lasted. It was the best nation.
And how did he make Americans feel about America?
He was just in many speeches. He described America as a shining city on a hill. That this was the best city, and that it was run by the people. The people were driving America forward.
Very good. Okay. All right. So how did Reagan view government? What would be kind of his core principles of the way he saw government?
Well, government for Reagan, he believed government wasn't going to fix the problem. Government was the problem. It was just too much spending, and the government was just bad. A famous quote from it was, some of the most intimidating words ever spoken would be, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Now, your dialectics student may not be quite as articulate as Daniel, but many dialectics students will be detail-oriented and able to tell you much of what they've read. The idea, then, is to use Socratic questions to lead them to see the connections between what they've been reading and their own lives. To demonstrate this point further, here's another video segment. This time, Daniel and his brother Ben are both taking part in a rhetoric discussion in the home. Watch here as Polly brings application within the discussion down to the boys' personal lives by asking them to associate their futures and their dad with what they've been learning in history about Ronald Reagan's leadership qualities. She's building their worldviews, helping them to think by asking leading questions.
You guys have been examining leaders all through the 20th century and looking at what it takes to be a good leader, what makes a bad, what causes someone to not be such a great leader. So when you think of Reagan as the leader, what would you say were some of his strengths in that area? Why don't you, Dan?
Well, he was just very strong. He was well-spoken. He was, one of his most common nicknames was the Great Communicator, because during speeches he just was so cool and he spoke well. He was humorous kind of during speeches, bouncy. He kept your attention to watch a speech, and he really made his points clear.
Okay.
And I think some of that came from, him being an actor before he became president.
Okay, so great. So the idea of being able to communicate well.
Yeah.
Okay, how about you, Ben? Can you think of something
he was comfortable in front of the cameras, which he had gained in his acting experiences, which really contributed to his being able to be comfortable in front of an audience. He really told you what he meant and what he thought, and he was very, very direct with his policies. He wouldn't waver from them and change them to match what the people wanted.
Okay, so he was true to his principles. What the principles that he believed, he did not waver from those principles. Yes. Okay, good. So when we're examining leadership that way, and what you think made him a good leader, if you were a leader, why would that be an important trait, do you think? Because you're going to be leaders in your home one day. Okay, you're probably going to be leaders in an office place or whatever it is that God calls you to do. So what about Reagan is admirable and that you would like to have?
Well, he was just sincere. He was, he kept your spirits. He was very inspiring, and he really kept you up. If you watched him, you really liked him. He was a likable person.
So do you think it's important as a leader to be likable?
Not necessarily, but that it helps, but
it made people want to follow him.
It
so
does.
When you're a leader, it helps if people want to follow. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Ben?
Another factor that made people want to follow him was that he did not focus on himself because he was humble. He pointed more to other people and pointed out the good things in them, which made him just a more likable person, which made people want to follow him.
So interesting, humility. So does the world usually value humility?
No, it doesn't.
No.
But in this case, it certainly did.
Okay.
In leadership.
So when you are a leader someday, humble leadership and servant leadership, what does that mean?
It's the kind of leadership that, Christ had. He was humble, and that's what we want to copy.
So when you watch Daddy, who we know is not perfect, right? But do you see that? Do you see that leadership?
Yeah.
Yes.
In what ways do you see that in Dad?
I think that he clearly communicates to us what he wants done and what needs to happen.
How about servant? How about it's the servant?
He's willing to give up stuff just for us, even if it's not the biggest thing.
Right. Can you think of an example of that?
I think that he pays for us to live in his house. That's kind of one thing.
Which we're very thankful.
He
right?
does.
But just even, just little decisions between what you want to eat, what you want to watch, what you want to do. He's willing to give it up just for kind of the pleasure of the family. And that's very just a
He's not forcing his own way. He's looking after you,
Yeah.
and he's putting your interests above his own. Right. That's leadership.
In the next video clip, Deb is leading a larger co-op group using Socratic questioning. The topic again is leadership, this time using positive and negative traits about President Nixon. Watch as Deb both skillfully asks leading questions and supplies some helpful interpretation for the students.
So we've been talking about President Nixon. Was he a good president? Shane?
More of a straight up answer, no, in my opinion.
No? Why? Why no? What were some of those qualities?
Well, he lied to the American public.
In what way?
Well, he was deceitful in that he said he didn't do something that he did do. He wouldn't own up for his mistakes. But he still had some good qualities that would be nice to see in lots of other presidents.
That's true. Like what? What was one of his qualities that made him a good leader? Dave?
I think he was one of the guys he was one of the presidents who would get both sides of the story, like hear both opinions so that he knew he was better educated to make the decision.
Okay, he did care about education. It's true. That was one admirable trait. Shane?
He loved history.
He did love history. And so what would that mean if you love history? Why would that be a good... Jesse?
You can learn from it, like learn from other people's mistakes and like learn from the ways that they did good.
That's true. Now, stemming off of that answer, what else was he noted for in our reading? Remember, as far as learning and mentoring maybe? Or does anyone remember?
He was a good teacher.
He was. He loved taking people under his wing, right? Yeah. What else? Can you think of any other qualities? said. What about something else negative? It's not admirable.
Oh, the Watergate scandal.
Yes, that was something that we were talking about. And as far as being dishonest, was there something else in the way his cabinet? Is there anything you can speak about, like the team that he got?
When he went into the presidency, I don't know if this is correctly right, but he fired all of the cabinet and then hired his own, like, people that he knew.
Oh yeah, didn't he? Didn't he put that in? Didn't he put all his own?
Yeah, all
his
his
friends
in the cabinet.
which isn't necessarily the best decision. Didn't Andrew Jackson?
Why do you think that's not the best decision to not put all your friends in? Wouldn't you want to do that?
I'd want to, but if the problem is not necessarily all your friends are, the wisest people for the decision. If you have friends who aren't very good people and aren't
But
wise,
you have friends that aren't good people. Just teasing. No, not just good people, but qualified, right?
Yeah.
We're looking for a cabinet member that's going to sharpen each other, right?
yeah, and if you just put your friends in, it could be bad because
You can dull on each other.
When you're in charge, let's say if you were a care group leader, and you were trying to do an outreach, how could this apply? What would you look for when you're looking for someone to help you or show you?
Leadership.
In what way?
And just helping to understand what you're saying, and to maybe, if you're not saying it right, then they can like translate it in different words so that the other people can understand it.
So you're saying you're looking for someone to help you lead.
Yes.
Okay, so you would look for a good leader. Okay, and what else? What are those qualities that you're looking for again in a good leader?
Humility.
Humility, honesty,
Hard worker.
Understanding.
good. Someone who's going to be a good listener, someone who loves God. When you are looking around for friends, and you know what the Bible says about that, how good company, bad company, and what it does, right? You can tell me one verse that goes along with that.
I don't remember the verse, but it says like if you're like companion of fools, like suffer
There's
harm.
harm. Good, that's one.
If you're companion of wise people, you'll become wise.
basically, if you hang around fools, their foolishness will rub off on you. And if you hang around wise people, their wiseness will rub off on you.
That's true. That's why. That's exactly right. So, in learning about all the different presidents, leaders, and the people they had in their cabinets, the choices they made, we're really looking at fruit, aren't we? We're looking at, just like you said, Dan, we're looking at all the different things from the past that they've done, decisions they've made. Although we do have to give people, there is hope. God is working in all of us, and we're all growing and changing. The Holy Spirit enables us to fight sin and grow. So we can look at that. We can see maybe some of the early decisions weren't wise, but what are they doing now? And what are they standing up for? Anything else that stands out to you with having wisdom and discernment when it comes to either being a leader or choosing a leader or following a leader?
When you have wisdom and discernment, you're able to help the leader when you see and discern it as wise.
How would you do that?
You would give suggestions on areas that, if you think the leader's going to do something foolish, you give a suggestion, and that's really all you can do. You can't force it down on them, but you can give them a suggestion. You see.
That's a good point. Okay.
I think it'll be much easier to follow a leader if he has good attributes like being humble and truthful and being more wise, and I just think it would be a lot easier to follow that leader since he has a plan and you know what he's doing and he communicates to you.
Good. Excellent.
One caution here. One can slip so easily into lecturing. If you're going to tell your students something or interpret for them, remember that they probably won't retain as well if it's told to them as if it's drawn out of them through questioning. We moms fall so easily into instruction. Try to fight that tendency so that your student will have to work to think his own thoughts and arrive at his own conclusions. He'll remember them much longer and hold on to them more tightly if he develops them for himself. Now, Socratic questioning is offered amidst literature outlines as well. In the next clip, Rebecca takes the same group of co-op students through a literature discussion at the rhetoric level on The Hobbit. She's asking them to analyze the characters according to literary terms and definitions that the students have been learning all year long. Let's watch.
So, in our discussion on The Hobbit, we've been focusing on the hero. So the hero is either another word for the main character of the story, or a character who has strong abilities which may be beyond the limits of the natural and who embodies the beliefs of a community. Given those definitions, is Bilbo a hero in The Hobbit? Ellie?
One way that I see him as a hero is when the dwarves are in the dungeon and I think the castle of the elves, and he is willing to stay in the castle and is trying to think of a way to help them, and I see that as self-sacrificing and as that a trait of a hero.
As in beyond the normal. Shane?
I also see that as how when the dwarves were all trapped by the spiders and up in the webs, instead of just running away and being a coward, he stopped, thought about it, and thought about a rescue plan to save all the dwarves instead of just thinking about himself.
Right. Good. Dan?
Kind of over the course of the story, you know, at the beginning he definitely is not a hero, but, you know, further on, kind of, once, you know, Gandalf leaves them, he says that, you know, Mr. Bilbo will serve you more than you think. Once, you know, the wizard is away, he kind of grows into, you know, heroism, and he gets bigger and bigger, and he doesn't necessarily feel brave while that's going on, but he is a hero during that time.
Julie?
Well, two ways to counter sort of what the others were saying is that, for one thing, he doesn't really present the view of his community. They're very much against adventures and things like that. And also, he's not very supernatural.
Right.
The only supernatural thing he has is the ring, which doesn't come from him.
So are you saying he's not a hero based on that?
I'm saying that he doesn't present all the aspects of hero.
I think it says beliefs of a community, not necessarily his own. So, Jesse?
I'd say at the beginning, he was kind of against going on the adventure, though. He was kind of scared and didn't really want to do it.
So did he change at all during the story?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't define him as a static character at all, right? No. Okay. One of the other things, does anybody remember Tolkien's description of Bilbo at all?
He was
A light bulb.
Small. I'm sorry.
Physical? Or
Actually, no, I'm sorry, not as the author, but Tolkien, on the back of the book cover, described Bilbo as Shane?
Just a small hobbit who lived in a hobbit hole and just ate and drank and slept, and then only came out when it was nice outside.
Okay, but he uses a phrase, it's an alliterative phrase. He was a humble hero.
A humble
hero. So, if we say he's a hero, is he a tragic hero, a comic hero, or a tragicomic hero?
He's kind of more of a tragicomic hero because in comedy it's much more lighthearted, and there isn't quite as much serious danger or I guess danger. But it's not a tragedy because it doesn't. His flaws don't lead to his eventual ruin. He has flaws, and those cause problems, and pretty bad problems too. But eventually, they come out to be good in the end.
Right. Okay. Got any other thoughts on that? Okay, just to move along. Normative character. Can somebody give me a definition, Julie, of a normative character?
Is a character that presents the author's beliefs or.
Right, point of view. Okay. So, which would be the normative characters from The Hobbit? Ben?
Gandalf is definitely a normative character because he presents several views throughout it, and he kind of forms Bilbo's worldview, which seems more to be in line with Tolkien's worldview from what we know of him.
Good. Anybody else? Julie?
Well, Bilbo, because he's the main character, you would naturally assume he's a normative character.
Okay, and so what do you see? I mean, assuming that's true, what do you see in Bilbo that would bear that out, in a sense, prove your assumption? David?
Well, he's a trustworthy friend, and I'm sure Tolkien probably want people to know that that's a good thing because it made it look desirable. Right. And he was, like, multiple times he did things to help the dwarves.
Right, that would be something that Tolkien valued and then Bilbo valued by evidence of what he actually did. Is that what you're saying? Okay, Jesse, any thoughts?
Well, I would say he values courage, because like even though, like what Ben said or Dan, like he didn't always feel courageous. He still was courageous. Like he was scared, but he was courageous.
And it kind of ties into what David said as being he was willing to be courageous and put himself in those dangerous positions to be that trustworthy friend. Yeah, good.
Finally, here I am on tape with this same group of students. I'm asking the students to apply leadership ideas that they've been learning throughout the unit to their own lives. Again, I'm not lecturing or telling them what to think. Rather, I'm drawing them out and helping them to analyze and synthesize their own views. And they're learning as much from their classmates' answers as they are from me.
So, you guys have been learning about Ronald Reagan and other presidents this year, and it's getting towards the end of the year. So let's do a little summing up today. What kinds of leadership qualities have you guys been noticing among the presidents, would you say would be prevalent? What kinds of things make a great president or a good presidential leader to you guys? Yeah?
The president being comfortable with himself so he can focus outward more.
Ah, okay.
Like Nixon did not do that, but Reagan really did. And we can see that Reagan was a much better leader.
Okay, good. Who else? Yeah.
I think honesty.
Honesty,
like,
because?
To like, so that people trust you.
Okay, yeah, Dan.
Maybe not just pushing for what you think is best, really think of what would be best for the country, not just what you think would be best.
So that would be servanthood, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking more like, not more character qualities, but more like skills in front of the microphone, because I know if I hear someone in front of the microphone and they're really boring and can't talk right, it's more of a hassle to try to listen to them. But Regan, he was very smooth in his voice, and it really helped when you listen to him.
So that skill really helped him become a good leader, Jess.
I'd say humility, like not yourself focus more on the country. Not
Okay, Jules?
Knowing who your friends are, like being able to trust the people who are helping you lead. And
Okay, so your team.
Yeah.
Uh-huh, okay. And why do you think that makes a good leader?
Because if you can't trust the people who are leading, you're going to be wanting to control everything, and that will get in the way of your effective leading.
That's right. So that ability to delegate and let other people help you.
I really appreciated how a lot of the presidents really outreach to the people, really went into the community and talked to them. I thought that was...
So did any of you guys take that into your own personal thoughts? I mean, all of you guys will be leaders either of your own home, you might be leaders in the workplace, something like that. You ladies may lead women's Bible studies or certainly lead your children in your homes. What kinds of things, as you've studied through the leaders this year, did anything challenge you? Did anything stand out to you as, that would be something I'd want to cultivate in my own life? Anything like that? Ben?
I thought, when I'm a father, I want to be able to communicate to my family more so they can understand me better.
Okay. Are you generally a man of few words? And so communication is hard to you? No, but you would want to what? What do you mean by that?
Communicate better, probably.
Okay.
More gently.
More gently. Okay. All right. And you feel like your children would then trust you better?
I guess so.
And then be more easily led, something like that? Okay, that's good. Ella?
Patience.
Patience.
Because I struggle with patience. So, and watching a lot of the presidents have patience with like the different circumstances, and then becoming a mother and having patience with my children is one thing.
What about overcoming? I noticed that a lot. Speak to anybody about, persevering, overcoming. A lot of these guys didn't have the very simplest life, right? As a matter of fact, all presidents, if you look back, have had to overcome quite a bit in their lives.
Something to take that into, your life would be knowing no matter what is thrown out at you, whatever circumstance or problem, that God is in control and He will get you through it.
Right. That's a good one. Anybody else have anything that you've taken home from the studying of the leadership?
I just say kind of like overcoming, but perseverance. Like even if you fail one time, like don't quit, but keep going.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Maybe composure, when you feel you're losing self-control, being able to compose yourself and catch it while it's happening instead of having to apologize.
That's a great one. That's a great one. So that would be self-control as well. You know, self-control is tough, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Shane, what were you gonna say?
More like being humble. Like, if you figure out that you're being wrong, instead of just keeping it all bottled up, then apologize and not be proud about it.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I hope that these video demonstrations have made the goals and process of Socratic questioning more clear to you. As I've said, most mothers do this instinctively at some points in their mothering career, but it's good to hone these skills and use them purposefully to help our youths form opinions. You know, one of my favorite things about Socratic discussion is the dignity that it affords the student. Young people are reaching for adulthood. They do have opinions, and they want to air and refine them. Socratic discussions are a grace-filled way for youths to do just that under the loving leadership of their parents. Learning to ask questions has helped me to truly inquire of my youths rather than jumping to judgments, which I so easily do, and then often to accusations before I understand the whole truth or the depth of their thought. In our parenting, the training that academics gave me in Socratic discussion really paved the way for better and better relations with my older teens. I learned not to react quickly to outlandish or questionable words or behaviors, learning that youths need to push those boundaries in order to explore them. Socratic questioning helped me to take a deep breath and begin to ask questions like, well, what did you mean by those words? Or, did you just mean to say X because that's what I heard you say? Or, are you certain that you understand the whole situation when you make a claim like that? Such questioning leaves youths room to back out of a silly statement or to change or modify and adjust their opinions without losing face. It's thus not just a tool for teaching academics, but a solid platform for parenting youths as well. Another growth curve that resulted in Scott and my life as parents from our adherence to Socratic questioning was that our children and those involved in our co-op classes learned important group dynamic skills. We found that in our family dinner times and in our classes with larger numbers of kids, we needed to teach some basic rules of the road when it came to discussions. Here's a list of things that we had to teach our youths that is by no means exhaustive. We had to teach them about discussion manners. In many cases, youths came into our co-op from homes where moms had been there, able to listen to every thought and request pretty much whenever the youths were ready to talk. They weren't used to taking turns or hearing what others were saying. So we taught them first to listen to each other. We taught them to wait and take their turns at speaking and not interrupt. Another important aspect was to train the kids to not belittle anyone for their answers. Socratic questioning demands thinking and speaking at the same time. Often a first try at an answer can seem silly or really, really wrong. We put the kibosh on all snickering, ribbing, or busting during our classes. We wanted students to have a safe zone where they could work to express their thoughts and not be humiliated for failed attempts. Another concept that we had to teach was that the teacher of a group discussion is the leader. With a larger group, Socratic questioning can take you down some great back roads, and some students in our group, usually the younger and therefore more literally minded ones, began to feel that the group was going nowhere when, in fact, the worldview building process was grooving right along from the mother's perspective. I've had kids raise their hands in class and try to redirect me back to the history lesson that they thought I'd abandoned or gotten off track. So we had to teach them respect for the teacher. She knows what she's trying to get at, and she knows what she's trying to get the students to see, and she's not ignorant of the lesson at hand. The history or literature truly are grist for the mill of learning, and the teacher is therefore always in charge during Socratic discussions. Finally, students need to be told right out that there's not always one right answer. Dialectic students tend to see the world, or want to, in black and white. Their brains are busy building a system of categories into which they look to place all the facts that they know. They want one unified system with clearly cut answers for all questions at this age. They are therefore uncomfortable with a discussion in which there are more than one valid points of view. The older you get, the more shades of gray you see in the world. Tell your students that it's okay if all answers are not clear-cut and if varying viewpoints have equal validity. Now, I'm not talking about calling good evil or evil good here. We're merely talking about the respect for points of view that are within biblical definitions of morality or personal choice. In closing, let's review the pitfalls to avoid while holding tapestry discussions over academic subjects. First, don't slip into default lecturing. Socratic discussion can include a few declarative statements by teachers and clarifying points, but try not to talk for long periods of time. Try to draw your student out to reach the conclusion that you want him to see. Second, academic ping-pong is not discussion. Try not to drop into that sing-song approach, which is so deadening to learning. Third, don't supply answers too soon for the student. I used to tell my students that they were like turtles slowly crawling along until I took them and turned them onto their backs. They had to wiggle and wiggle, trying to turn themselves right side up. I wasn't in a hurry to help them. I just stood back and watched. I would never tell my students what I thought the answer was to a sticky wicket or a difficult issue. The learning for them was in the struggle. By the time the discussion is over, too, they were righted again, but they were headed in a new direction and often hardly aware of the change. Fourth, be aware that you cannot successfully ask a question that requires too big a leap. You saw this in some of the video clips. Teachers can ask questions that draw a blank from your student. Your job then as a Socratic teacher is not to supply the answer, but to break that big leap down into a series of smaller ones, such that the student can answer simpler questions to arrive at the point where you first asked him to leap. With practice and maturity, most students will take larger and larger leaps over time. Fifth, don't be impatient with either your students or with yourself. It takes time to build discussion muscles, so give your students and yourself grace. Our session number 8 of the Tapestry Teacher Training Series gives you lots of specific tips for helping new or younger dialectic students to develop the skills that make them better able to engage in Socratic discussions. But it will take time and patience on your part. The same is true for rhetoric students who come midstream into Tapestry. Sixth, and finally, be careful not to fall into the trap of requiring analysis of students who are too young for it. Remember what we've learned about learning levels in our other sessions and try to limit your expectations to the stage that your student is really and truly in. Thanks for listening to this presentation. Now that I'm done, I'd encourage you to go back and rewatch some of the video clips again, possibly repeatedly, and see even more clearly the types of questions that moms are asking and the typical responses that students give so that you can benefit the very most from this session. God bless and take care.